Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Believe TV. My name is Bruce Sampson, and I am your host. Thank you so much for joining. Um, Hi, we're already getting people saying hello. Hi, Wendy, how are you? I see snow in that picture. Is that what's going on right now where you are? I would love to have some snow around this time. I don't know if I think it was last year. We had snow. We were kind of surprised by some snow uh, here in Louisiana. My good friend Michael Galloway. Hey, my brother, how are you, man? Giving us a shout out from Atlanta. Thank you all so much for joining. Um, I'm gonna I'm gonna start this by asking a question. So uh, I'm trying out a new intro, and I want to know if you guys saw the intro, because from my end, I can't tell if it actually played or not. But if you saw the intro, let me know if you saw it, first of all. And secondly, if you did see it, if you like that as opposed to the old intro. And that would obviously necessitate that you would have seen the other one before. But yeah, I just want to play around with some different ideas. Miss Karen from Germany. Hey, 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 my friend, how are you? Good to see you. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate that so much. If you are tuning in for the very first time, I just want to let you know that this is an interactive forum, and we encourage you to say hello, give us a shout out, and let us know where, or let me know us, and let me know where you are and that you're here with us. I really, really appreciate that and appreciate you taking the time to be here and everything. Mr. Gerard, thank you for being here as well. Um, so today's episode is it's going to be interesting. Basically, it's me telling two different stories. Hey, Miss Renita, uh, good to see you. Oh, Miss Wendy said she loved it. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. My cousin Jeanette is in the house as well. Awesome. So glad to have you all. So a number of things led to Wendy's in Philly. Okay. I wish I remember that when it was about a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago. I was in the Philadelphia area, my one and only time in that area. But I hope to get back there someday. Um, but I wish I remembered that you were there, because I would have tried to arrange to see you or have you come see the show or something, at that time. Um, but anyway, so this has been a crazy week for me. Like, so much stuff has gone on. I've gone through so many different waves of emotions and stuff. So many different things happening. And um, so a few days ago, I was, went out and got the mail, and I was walking back in, and I was looking at my garage, and there's a number of things in my garage that had just been there for years. There's stuff that my mom had, placed, in different places against the walls of the garage and in some of the rooms and stuff in the garage. And I stopped for a second and just looked at it, because I usually just ignore it. I usually just walk past it and don't think much about it. But then I thought, I should probably go through some of this stuff and clean it up and clear it out and stuff, eventually. And so um, during the course of me looking at the garage, I noticed that there was this big silver trunk. And so I looked at the trunk and I was like, oh yeah, I remember that trunk. I used to carry that around. I forgot who gave it to me or how I got it. It's probably my mom and dad. But I initially had it when I first went to college to Loyola in New Orleans. And so that was a trunk that I kept at the end of my bed in my dorm room. And I just kept, a bunch of stuff in there. And over the years, I had that trunk with me. I'm sure I took it with me to Atlanta when I lived there. And I may have even taken it up to Michigan with me, when I did dinner theater up there, whatever. Don't know, don't remember. But so I couldn't remember the last time I'd opened that trunk. And so I was curious what was in it. And I was assuming that it probably didn't have anything of mine in it. It was probably something that my mom put out there and just, put a bunch of junk in it. So I was expecting to say, okay, what kind of junk is in this trunk? junk in the trunk. So I opened the trunk. Luckily, it didn't have a padlock on it. I opened the trunk, looked inside, and I was surprised by the number of things that were in there, and they were all mine. Everything in there were things that were mine that I obviously placed in there, but they've been in there for years. And so, um, and I'm not really going to talk about this too much, but the biggest surprise for me was uh, my record. So, for those that don't know, I did a record back in 1982, I think is when I recorded it. I was 18 years old and I was signed to a label out of New Orleans. And so I signed a deal and I cut two songs. Um, one called You're Bad, which was the release that we put out on the radio down south. And then another one that was a ballad called Stay Be My Lady. And that one was actually played on radio up north. So anyway, so yeah, so I after all these years, I've had no people reach out to me saying, hey, you know, I want to get that record from you, you know, whatever. And I'll tell you that story later because there's more to tell about that that's developing as we speak. So I'll share that more of that with you later. But anyway, I thought, based on my looking around and stuff, I only had 3 copies left of that record, and it was an EP, so extended play. So on one side, it had those 2 radio length versions of those 2 songs I talked about, and then the up-tempo dance song, You're Bad, was on the flip side, but as an extended play version so that they could play it in clubs and discos and all that. Right? Well, disco was over by that time, but you know what I'm saying. So anyway, I opened this trunk, and to my surprise, there was a whole stack of those records in there. Never been opened, in perfect condition, wrapped and sealed, and the whole deal. So I was thrilled. Like, that was just so exciting to me to find those, because I knew I had 3, and people over the years had asked me, you know, to purchase them from me. And I'd always said no, because I only have 3 left, and so I'm going to give one to each of my daughters. I'm going to leave them to their devices, whatever they, you know, if they want them. And so so that was the plan. So all of a sudden, here I am with this trunk, and I see that, and I'm excited. But then I start looking around at the other stuff that's in there, and I mean, there's magazines and articles and different things in there, and you know, what have you. And then I found some pictures and some other things from my days in the boy band that I was in. And so I posted about that on Facebook, and that got a lot of traffic, and it got a lot of attention from people who were surprised by it. And I remembered that I was like, oh yeah, that's right. In my life, I kind of had this joke I've been telling for years, which is I'm still trying to figure out. I'm in my 50s, and I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to be when I grow up, because I've done so many different things in so many different areas. And depending on how you knew me and encountered me, that may be all that you know about me. And so sometimes I'll bring up something to someone and they'll be shocked, because they're like, wait a minute, I just knew you as doing this one thing too. So they didn't know that I was an actual recording artist, and that I actually had my own record out, and I toured and all this stuff that's associated with that. And again, we'll talk about that some other time. But today I wanted to talk about the boy band thing. And so I use the term now because that's what everyone's familiar with. But back then when we did it, that wasn't a term. It was just, we were a vocal group. You know, we were just a vocal group. And, you know, the dance and stuff too, but we were a vocal group. So I wanted to talk about, I was going to share that story, and then I'm going to share another story. And all of this stems from what I found in that trunk. And then secondly, when I posted those things online, the response that I got, the overwhelming response from both those posts. So that's what these 2 stories are about, to fill in the gaps for those friends and those folks that don't know these things about me. I'm going to share some of this stuff with you, some of those stories and some of those memories. Okay, so we're going to start with the boy band. the vocal group. So, so let's go back a little ways. So I'm thinking this was 1985, 86. It was sometime after my dad passed away because I had been living in Atlanta and I moved back home so that I could be with my mom after my dad passed away. And I spent a little over a year uh, back in Bogalusa, Louisiana. But I was also going to school in Baton Rouge at the time. So I was going back and forth. I was staying on campus during the week and then coming home on the weekends. Anyway, as that year was coming to an end, I decided that, I was ready to move on with my life and my career. And so I decided, my cousin Jeanette says 85. Okay. Um, so I decided to go ahead and move back out to Southern California and pursue a music career, which I had walked away from as a solo artist. But one of the things I realized was one of the things I didn't like about the solo thing was I liked the idea of being on stage with other people and being part of a group. Hey, Bob, good to see you, my friend. Thank you for joining as well. Good to see you. Um, so I'm still here in Louisiana, and I'm starting to think about, okay, so I'm going to put together a group. So who do I want in this group? And so the first person, so I'm actually going to share this on screen so that I can have visual aids as I tell the story. In fact, I'm going to do it like this, so you can see that even bigger. So you see me smaller in the corner. Okay, so the group that we had was called the Mercury Project. And I'm going to tell you about them in just a second. But this is how I want to tell you how it started. So the idea was I was literally out mowing the lawn. I was riding lawnmower, in Louisiana, in my house. And I'm mowing, and all of a sudden I got this idea for this song. And the song would eventually be called Throw Away the Memories. And it was because I was actually listening to New Edition. I was listening to something New Edition, as I, had my headphones on as I was mowing the lawn, the riding lawnmower, and I'm listening to New Edition and stuff. And then all of a sudden it kind of hits me. I'm like, wait a second. I think that's the kind of group I want, because I grew up inspired by the Jackson 5 and the Osmonds and the Silvers and, and all that. And so I'm like, yeah, I think that's the ticket. I want a vocal group because I love harmonizing. And so I started coming up with this idea. So I turned off the New Edition and I came up with this idea. I remember stopping the lawnmower, running inside so I could figure out the chords and write down the lyrics and everything. And so I did that. And so I immediately started thinking, okay, well, who do I want in this group? So the first person I thought of was Kenny Morris. Okay. So hold on a second. So these are pictures. We did one photo shoot, when we first got together, and these are some pictures from that photo shoot. In fact, it was my friend Andy Trago who shot those pictures for us. He was nice enough to do that, and this was right outside the dinner theater I was working at in Southern California. Because eventually, when I moved out to Southern California, I got a job with the Young Americans out in Newport Beach at a place called Tibby's Music Hall, or Baxter Street. It was actually called Baxter Street at that time. And so anyway, so this is what I looked like back then, Jerry curl and all. And first person I called was my friend Kenny Morris. Now, for those of you that know him or know the show, he's been a guest on the show several times. He's the one who's a direct descendant of Frederick Douglass and Booker T. Washington. And I've had him on the show before as a guest before. So Kenny was the first person I called because Kenny and I had worked in Atlanta at the dinner theater there, and he and I had a lot of the same aspirations and likes and dislikes and all of that. So we both came up being fans of the Jackson 5 and all of that. So I called him up. I'm like, dude, we got to put a group together. Let's put a vocal group together. And and I'm working on some stuff, and I'm going to move out there, and then let's do it. And he's like, yeah, I'm down, I'm down, I'm down. So immediately I knew that the next person I wanted to be in the group was this gentleman, Samuel J. Holly. I wanted him because Sam had the most incredible tenor voice, and he actually was one of those people who had like different voices depending on what he sang. So when he sang his falsetto, um, it was like it was prettier than Smokey Robinson. Like it was just pure and pretty and amazing. But in the next breath, he could sing um, jazz like Ella Fitzgerald, and just do all this stuff. And he was amazing and an incredible stage performer and dancer. So I'm like, yes, 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 that's our group. So we're going to be a trio. So that was the initial thought, that we were going to be a trio. And originally, our name was Mirage. I don't remember who came up with that name or why, but we were going to be called Mirage. That was the original idea. So call up Sam. He says he's down. I'm like, great. So once I get there in California, we get together. We go to Sam's house. We sit at his piano. I go through a couple of songs that I've written, teach them the parts, and we're harmonizing. It's sounding good. We're like, yeah, 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 this is going to be great. So then we called up a friend of ours, Paula Prince, who was, I'm going to try to shorten the story though, because it's getting really long, but I called up my friend Paula Prince, God rest her soul as well. But she was someone that we worked with in Atlanta as well for a short time, and she was an amazing musician. And I'd asked her to help me with some of the vocal arrangements. And when we started gigging, I knew we were going to need a band. And so I said, hey, can you, help us out with that and help put together a band and, what have you. And she said, yeah, no problem, no problem. So, so then I'm working at the dinner theater and I meet this guy who's working there. And we've never met before, but his name is Roberto Valdez. And we just called him Bob back then. But Roberto Valdez. And he worked at the dinner theater as well. And he had this incredible voice, and he could sing rock like wow, like all the screaming and stuff too. But he also had this soulful quality too. He could sing like Kenny Loggins or Michael McDonald, but then he could do R&B, and it was like, oh man, this dude is bad. Awesome, awesome, awesome. So I invite Kenny down. I'm like, Kenny, come and see this guy. Kenny's like, oh yeah, we got to ask him. So after the show, we take him out and take him out to dinner and have a discussion, and then he's in the band, right? Okay. Thank you, Ms. Karen. Good looking man. So now the group is 4, and I went, oh, that's perfect. That's perfect. I should back up, because there was another person who was supposed to be in the group that I wanted to be in the group before we got Bob, and that was Ray Garcia. So Ray Garcia was this incredible dancer that I knew from Young Americans, who also had a really good tenor voice. And so I'm like, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. And we all had different looks, and I'm like, oh, this is going to be awesome. Just the blend of all of us together. So that was going to be the original 4. That was going to be the original 4. Then Ray got a gig, and I don't remember if that's when he went out with Debbie Gibson on the road on tour, but he got some gig, and so he couldn't do it. So then that's when we asked Bob to join the group, and he did. Okay, so now enter Michael Lopez. Michael Lopez was also in our cast in Atlanta. Incredible vocalist, but he was primarily an actor and musical theater performer, but incredible, beautiful voice. But we hadn't thought of him before, or at least I hadn't, because I knew that his interest was doing theater, and acting and everything. And so, but we go over to Paula's house, and Paula to work on the arrangements and everything. And so we get there, and his stage name was Garen. So I'll often refer to him as Garen, so don't get confused. His name is Michael Lopez, but his stage name was Garen Michaels. So I'll say Michael for now. So Michael was there visiting Paula. And so we went in, and Paula had this arrangement for one of the songs I had written. And it actually had 5 parts. to it. So it was a 5-part thing. It was really a 4-part thing, but with a moving bass thing that I was going to sing. And so, and with the lead vocalist and all that. And so she goes, Garen, sing this. When you guys in the studio, you can just record the other part, layer in that other part. I'm like, yeah, no problem. And so Michael, sang with us. And from the moment we hit that first chord, it was like, oh, it was beautiful. It was so beautiful. And we're like, okay. And then we were 5. And then there were 5 of us. And we were, oops, don't want to do that one yet. Okay. So I'll go back to, let's just do that picture for now. So anyway, so that group, which was called the Mercury Project, then we went into the studio to go record our demo, because we were going to have a demo, and we had a plan of how we were going to do this. And so we went into the recording studio, and just before we went into the studio, we were having some thoughts, some questions about the name Mirage. And so Kenny and I remember us sitting, I think we just walked into the studio or something. I think we were doing mixing or something that last day or something, or mixing or mastering or something. And so we were in the studio with the engineer and the owner of the studio, and Kenny and I had just decided to name the group Mercury instead of Mirage. And we said Mercury because Kenny had been called Mercury when he played football in high school. And he was kind of named after Mercury Morris back in the day, for those of you who remember NFL back in the day. And so I was like, Mercury, I like that. Let's call ourselves Mercury. I like that. And so, because I like the whole planet thing, I thought that was really cool. So I'm like, yeah, Mercury. So we're sitting, we've mixed all the stuff, and the engineer turns to us and he's putting everything and boxing everything up, and he's getting ready to label the tapes. And it said, what's the name of your group? And we said, oh, Mercury. And he goes, great. Okay. So he wrote down the Mercury Project, because every recording he did, whatever it was called, he would call it whatever the group's name, project. And so it became the Mercury Project. And immediately Kenny and I looked at each other like, dude, that's the name. And so, and I'm trying to switch back really quick. Okay, so I'm switch back just for a second. So we became the Mercury Project. And so that became our name, which is kind of funny, because if you were to see the video from our very first show, or any of the flyers or anything from our very first show that we did in Hollywood at the Roxy, we were listed as Mirage. But we were then introduced on stage as the Mercury Project. So that's how close it was to the name change happening. Okay, so anyway, so our group pretty much, I wrote the majority of the music, especially in the beginning. Kenny and I co-wrote some of the stuff together. So we collaborated on a couple of things. And then a year or 2 into it, the other guys started writing some stuff too, contributing some songs as well. And part of that was my request, because I didn't want everything to be on my shoulders. I'm like, what if the reason we don't get signed is because my music isn't good enough or whatever? So I'm like, I want you guys to contribute as well. And so we all sang lead from time to time, and we all harmonized, and we put on some amazing shows. But the only shows we ever did, Kenny posted that he said we only did 2 shows. I think we did 3. I'm picturing 3 different shows that we did. One was a showcase that we did. The very first one was with Paula Prince and her band, a guy named Robbie, that she'd worked with and co-written some stuff with. And then there was a group called Goddess. And they were 3 girls, and they were all friends of ours. And they performed it, and we performed. And we killed it, man. That first show, we killed it. We got such great response, and we actually got some interest. We had some people from some labels that were there, and so we got some meetings from that, and we got some interest, from it and stuff. We just never could get them to fully, buy in and actually get a deal signed. But we never did what everyone else did, which is, gigging every weekend and constantly, trying to do gigs and build up a fan base and all that stuff. We didn't do that. We just decided every once in a while we would do these concerts, and we'd rent out the Roxy and we'd do a show, and then we'd sell tickets to it or whatever, and we do these concerts. So we only recorded the one time, that one demo, and we did, to my estimation, we did three concerts. One that was kind of a showcase, and the other two were concerts. And so, but they were all at the Roxy and what have you. So eventually we split up because Garen wanted to go do acting, as I initially thought. Sam didn't have a major love for what we were doing. Like, he really wanted to do more jazz stuff and some other musical theater stuff. And so we all kind of went our different ways. Kenny did a solo project, and then he was with another group for a while. And I think Bob went off to Japan and performed there for a while. And then I was doing my own thing, and I did a solo thing for a minute, whatever. So that was my Mercury Project era. But during that time, a lot of other stuff happened where there was a lot of interest actually in my songs, from different folks, including the father of actress Tina Yothers. So if you remember the show Family Ties with, they were the Keaton family, but it was Michael J. Fox was the star of the show. And he played Alex P. Keaton. And the youngest daughter on there was Tina Yothers. I don't remember offhand what her character's name was, but anyway. But her dad reached out to me because all of a sudden she had an interest in getting a recording deal and whatever. So she was on the verge of getting that, and he reached out because somehow he gotten a hold of our demo, and he wanted a couple of the songs from the demo, but he wanted them for her. And I refused to give up the songs, but I did write something for her. I don't think she ever did it or whatever, but I went to her house several times, and they had a studio at their house and whatever. And anyway, so lots of other stuff happened. So that's one part of my life that a lot of people don't know is that. There was also a part towards the end of the Mercury Project, I think for our very last show. Kenny and Sam and I all got extensions. So we had long hair extensions that it kind of looked like Jerry Curl, but even longer. And mine was like past my shoulder length. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it was long. But anyway, so we went through that whole phase, and there was a whole bunch of other stuff that happened with that. And we had some other opportunities, but in the end, we just, decided to go, our separate ways and do our separate things. So that is basically the story of my boy band era, without me going into a whole bunch of detail about some of the other things that we went through. But so for those of you who are curious, yes, there are videotapes of our concerts. And at one point, I will try to pull those out and convert those so that we can put them online, because they're on VHS tape. So I'm going to have to convert those to digital and then put them online. So for anyone who's interested in the future, at some point I'll get around to doing that and uploading that. So that's the story of the Mercury Project and my boy band era. Okay, so now the next day I posted something else, or a day or two later I posted something else on Facebook that had to do with a picture that I found, which was my aunt, Georgia Martin, who's like, second mom to me. She lived right next door to me. We shared a driveway. Our houses shared a driveway. And Karen says, me. um, so uh, anyway, when I was younger, there's again talking about the different parts of my life and the things that people don't know, that not everyone knows about me or whatever. So a lot of my friends in California and the people that knew me at Yahoo or people that knew me in other ways may not be aware that there was a practically a full year that Stevie Wonder was basically in my hometown of Bogalusa, Louisiana. Okay. And so here's the story of a 12, 13-year-old boy, Bruce, who encounters Stevie Wonder and how that journey began. So here's the story. And please keep in mind that where I'm leading to with this picture and all the stuff that I'm going to talk about, this is all coming from my perspective and what I knew that transpired. There are certain things around what we're eventually going to get to that um, may have had other people's input and involvement that I was not aware of. I'm just going to tell you from my vantage point what went down. Okay, so this is what it was. So there's this place in town. I live outside the city limits, about a mile or two outside of the city limits of Bogalusa, Louisiana. And folks usually refer to it as the country, so I live out in the country. Right? And so there are two main streets that go straight through the town. One is Columbia Street, and that's the street I live on. So Columbia Street basically starts a little bit past my aunt's house. And, if you're coming from New Orleans, let's say. So that's where Columbia Street starts, and it goes straight through town, right? And goes straight out of town into the next town. Well, kind of, by way of some twists and curves. Anyway, there's another street, which we've historically called Sullivan Drive, which is named after some of the founders of the town. So Sullivan Drive would come straight, Highway 21, it would come straight through from another town further down, all the way through and all the way out town. We're on that back road. There was a restaurant and hotel called Sportsman's Inn. There was Sportsman's Inn Steakhouse and Seafood Restaurant, and there was the hotel. So the way this whole thing was set up, this is what you have to picture. So right off of this main big highway, there's in the center back is the restaurant, this big restaurant. And then there's a parking lot right in front of it. In the center of the parking lot is a big outdoor pool, swimming pool. Okay. On either sides of the parking lot of that pool are the hotel rooms. Okay. Now, on the back side, so if you're facing it on the right side of the restaurant, they had a basketball goal back there. So like a little half court basketball situation set up. And because we were good friends with the owners, and I'm pretty sure my family had actually sold that property to them to build all that. So they were really cool about letting me come back there and play basketball. And one of the things that I would do, sometimes with my cousins, but a lot of times I just go alone, is I go back there, either ride my bike or I walk from my house because it wasn't that far. And I'd walk back there and I just shoot baskets because I knew I could usually get a pickup game, because we had a place in town called the Studio in the Country. And it was a state-of-the-art recording studio that a lot of artists would come through. A lot of the artists were from the Louisiana, New Orleans, Mississippi area, but we also had some other big names that would come through as well. And so when they did, oftentimes the musicians, the band members, would stay at the Sportsman's Inn Hotel. And so usually if I went out there and played basketball for a while, usually some of those guys would come out because they'd be bored or, whatever. And they come out and say, hey, want to play a little ball? I'm like, yeah. And so I'd always get a pickup game with them. So I'd meet all these different groups and stuff. Like I met some of the members of Maze from Frankie Beverly and Maze, if any of you know that group. I met the Baptiste Brothers, the Neville Brothers, some other groups, right? And some bands that I don't remember their names, right? Um, so anyway, so that was just commonplace. And usually as we're playing and stuff, I go, hey, so you guys with a band? And they're like, yeah, how'd you know? I always say, oh yeah, I know, because of the studio. You guys are probably here to record. And they're like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And so they tell me who they were with. I go, okay, great. So this one day I go back there and I'm playing, and a couple of guys come out and they're like, hey, yeah, we want to play, a little pickup basketball with you. And so, so we're playing basketball, and then we take a little break at one point. I'm sitting down with these guys, and they introduce themselves to me. One is Greg, one is Nate. Those are the two I remember the most. And I think the other one was Raymond. And so I think it was the four of us at first, but there were other musicians too that were coming in and out. So we were playing, and we took a break. And so I chose that time to ask them, oh, so I'm assuming you guys are with a band and that you're recording at the studio in the country. And he's like, yeah. How'd you know that? And so I tell him, oh yeah, yeah, I've been at the studio a lot, and whatever. And so, so then I asked them, well, what band are you with? And they said, oh, our band is called Wonder Love. I'm like, cool, Wonder Love. Never heard of you guys. Said, well, we haven't really recorded anything. We've just been a backup band so far. I'm like, oh, cool. Who do you back up? And they kind of looked at each other for a second, and then they looked at me and they said, Stevie Wonder. Okay, I immediately looked at them and went, okay, I'm not stupid. I may be a young kid. I may be in a small little paper mill town, but I'm not stupid. Because what you have to understand is, at that time, Songs in the Key of Life, Stevie Wonder's biggest record-breaking, incredible album, had been released. And at least the first one or two songs had been released and had gone to the top of the charts. So Stevie Wonder was probably the hottest thing in the music industry at that point, right then, right? His stuff was hot. And so the idea that Stevie Wonder would be in Bogalusa, Louisiana was absurd to me. That made no sense whatsoever. So so we went on, we continued to play. And they're like, really, really, really? I'm like, yeah, whatever. So we kept playing and stuff. And then later, before I left, I said, okay, I'm going to ask you one last time. Like, who are you guys really with? He said, look, we're telling you the truth. We're with Stevie Wonder. I'm like, okay. So a few more days of me coming back and playing and stuff. And finally, one of the guys said, look, we got permission to let you come out to the studio the next time we go if you're interested in, if you can get permission from your parents. Went, no problem, because my dad knew, the owner of the studio at that time, and I'd been out there several times and all of that, and I knew they wouldn't care, I knew they'd be fine with it. So sure enough, they take me out to the studio in the country, and there's Stevie Wonder. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. So I come back and tell my mom and my aunt and my dad, everybody, you guys, I met Stevie Wonder. He's here in town. He's doing a new album. It's for a documentary called Secret Journey Through the Life of Plants. And he's going to be here a while. And oh my gosh, Stevie Wonder, right? And they're like, you're kidding me. You're making that up. I'm like, I promise you, I just met Stevie Wonder. So then my mom and my aunt start talking, and my aunt had just been promoted recently to assistant principal at Bogalusa Junior High School. And so she immediately starts thinking, wow, wouldn't it be great if we could get Stevie to come to the school and just talk to the kids and tell them, stay in school and stay off drugs, right? Like some little speech like that. So that was her plan. So she's like, can you arrange it for us to, to meet? So at that point, I knew pretty much everybody in the band. I knew Stevie's personal assistant, Josette, and I knew Stevie's manager, Clarence Paul. So I go to Clarence Paul and I explain the situation. So he goes, sure, and he talks to Stevie. And so it arranges for my mom and my aunt to come out and speak to Stevie. So I'm standing there when they propose the whole thing to Stevie. And Stevie says, tell you what, if it's okay with you, I'll do you one better. Instead of me just coming to talk to them, I'll bring the band out and we'll do a little mini concert for them. And not only will we do a mini concert at the junior high, at that time we had two high schools. There was one high school that was just for ninth grade, and then there was another one for 10th through 12th. And so he said, I'll go to all three of those schools and do a concert. And so Miss Renita Cook said the biggest of all time. Yeah, he was huge back then. And so I'm standing there when that deal is made. When Stevie proposes, I will come and do these concerts. And so like, oh, of course, I have to, my aunt's like, I got to get permission from the principal and from the superintendent and all that, but that's going to happen. And so I'm just standing there going, are you kidding me? Of course, immediately they turn to me and they're like, you got to keep this secret because no one can know. It's got to be a surprise because if you know, it's just going to be bedlam if anyone finds out. So for days, I had to keep that quiet. Like I go to school and I couldn't say anything. And I wasn't at junior high though. I was junior high age, but I was at school at Annunciation Catholic School at that time. And so, so the day of the performance, and I'm going to go ahead and get this screen. So this is the picture that I found. Here it is. So this is the picture of my aunt. It's my Aunt Georgia May right there. And, she's got a hold of Stevie's arm. She's about to lead him out to all the kids who've been summoned to the gym for an assembly. Because they didn't have like a theater or anything. They just had the gym. And it had upper seating, like second level. There was seating and stuff up there. And so most of the students were up there, and then some of the classes came and sat on the floor in front. And of course, I was right down center in the front, and all that. But at first, I was back here with them. So I snapped this picture. And so there's a couple of pictures like that. I was so happy to find this one because I've been looking for them for years and didn't know where they were. So I found this one. But there's also pictures of me with Stevie before and after the concert. And there's a point where the jacket he's wearing right now, I was holding his jacket. I was helping him put his jacket on when the thing was over because he didn't wear that when he played the actual show. And in fact, let's see if I have. Yeah, so you see right here. So he's not wearing the jacket. So this is from the newspaper clipping. This is the newspaper clipping of Stevie Wonder at Bogalusa Junior High. You can see his musicians behind him and stuff. And so that picture obviously was taken by the newspaper photographer, reporter. But that just shows you that. Now here's another picture. That's my dad standing behind Stevie, right? And that's Ray on the drums. Raymond is on the drums behind Stevie. And if you notice, you can see my dad's eye kind of looking off to the side and smiling. It's because he's looking at me. I'm taking a picture of him at the same time that the reporter from the newspaper took the picture. And so this is a picture. I took a picture of this. This is actually on my wall here in my office. A picture of my dad with Stevie. But I have not been able to find my picture of with me with Stevie. So I'm still looking for that and hoping that I will someday come across it. Yeah, so that's my dad, Mr. Sampson. He was a teacher also at the junior high school. He taught special education at the school and did a whole lot more than that. But anyway, so that's from that performance. And Stevie would end up going on to do one other show at the big high school from the 10th through 12th grade. But he ended up not being able to do the one at 9th, and I won't even bring up why, but There are some reasons why that didn't happen. But he ended up doing the other one. And on that one, I actually got to go on stage with them at that point for that one. Um, I didn't really do anything. I just pretended like I was doing stuff, but they just let me be up there. So, so that's one of the Stevie Wonder stories. There's a whole lot more because again, Stevie Wonder and his band were basically there for a year, recording at the studio and doing the soundtrack for this documentary called Secret Journey Through the Life of Plants. And there were a couple of songs that they released from that soundtrack as singles on the radio um, that didn't, they clearly didn't do as well. The one that I remember, which I think was the first release, was Send One Your Love or Send One Her Love, Send One Your Love, something like that. Um, Send One Your Love with a dozen roses, something. But it was a pretty song, but whatever. But after having done Songs in the Key of Life and with all those hits that were on that double album plus a 45 inside. Like, so, not sure if everybody got that version, but I had that version. But anyway, so for that year, I got to hang out with Stevie and his brother and his manager and his band. I would often be at the studio with them because Josette, his personal assistant, had, I believe it was a son, but she had a child, a young child, and I would often be the person that would just hang out and keep them occupied and play games with them and stuff like that. And thank you, Miss Karen. I like that you watch too. um, yeah, I have some crazy stories. I've been extremely blessed in my life to have some incredible things that have happened and experiences. And so I'm just gonna, since I only have a few minutes left, I'm going to throw in really quickly some of the other things, some of the highlights of that time period when Stevie was there. And then I'm going to wrap it all up with a story fast forwarding to the future. So the person that I actually hung out with the most and who was the nicest to me and getting to know me, aside from Stevie's brother, because Stevie's brother, Calvin Hardaway, was super, super nice. And he let me hang around and assist him in different things and whatever. And he would also not listen to, I would write songs and I would just bring him the lyrics. And he gave me the best advice about my songwriting. And it was, he would read my stuff and he goes, yeah, this is really clever. You're clearly talented. However, he said, the thing is, he goes, I think you need to go back and listen to some of Stevie's stuff as an example, because the stuff you're writing is too difficult. Like, it feels like you're not really trying to tell us stories as Stevie does, or to relate some emotion or feeling or whatever, or share emotions and stuff with us. It feels like you're trying to prove how smart you are. And he was totally right, because I was trying to use the biggest words and phrases and references to Shakespeare and all kinds of stuff when I wrote, because I wanted to impress them at how smart I was. And he was the one that told me, no, just tell the story, man. When you write the songs, just tell the story. In fact, the simpler it is, the more relatable it's going to be to your audience and the more memorable it's going to be for your audience. And so that's one of the things I took to heart. And that came not from Stevie, but from his brother, Calvin Hardaway, who had a front row seat to all of Stevie's success and creations and all that stuff. And so that was that. Stevie's manager, Clarence Paul, would hire me sometimes and pay me so they had rental cars, right? They had, I think it was I think they had Mercedes and whatever. So they had several rental cars. And so they would pay me to wash the cars, like, hey, will you wash the cars and bring them to us, whatever. And so I get paid to do that. And then other times I just go hang out at the studio. And for me, that was the payment enough. Like, just to watch Stevie work and just to hang out and see what these guys did was amazing. And then when I wasn't at the studio, there were a lot of times when I'm just hanging out with them down at the hotel. And Greg Fillinganes was this young keyboard player with Stevie. And I think this was probably his first real major gig was working with Stevie, because he's someone who had been trained overseas in England, and I don't really remember exactly, but I just remember being really impressed with, oh, he studied, at these amazing places and conservatories and whatever. So he was incredible keyboard player. And he would always have a couple of keyboards and synthesizers up in his room, and he would sometimes let me use them and play around on them and stuff. And so I'm just going to throw out this little nugget about that. I wasn't sure if I was going to say this one, but I am. So I was with him when he got a phone call from Michael Jackson with Greg. I was with Greg. He gets this phone call from Michael Jackson where Michael explained that he was going to be doing a solo project with Quincy Jones, and that he came highly recommended and he'd like for him to work on it. And that solo project that he was talking about was Off the Wall. Well, in that instance, I asked, and I'm like, oh man, that's amazing. You're going to get to work with my hero and everything. And he said, no, I'm probably not going to do it because, who knows what I'm doing with Stevie. And I don't really know about Michael Jackson. And, I don't really know whatever. Well, fast forward a year or two later, and I'm now working at WIKC Radio in Bogalusa. And the album Off the Wall comes out. So I'm playing records and stuff. And as the records are playing, you open up the album and read the liner notes, which will tell you who played on, which songs, who played what, and who wrote what, and all that stuff. And I look at it, and Greg Fillingane's name is all over the place. Synthesizers, keyboards, Greg Fillingane's, arrangements, Greg Fillingane's, co-written by Greg Fillingane's. I'm like, what? He told me he wasn't going to do it. Oh my gosh, he actually did it. He not only did that, he went on to work on Thriller, co-write some stuff on Thriller. He was also a keyboard player on We Are the World. So if you ever get a chance to see the video of the making of We Are the World, there's a part where Michael and Lionel Richie are in the studio, and they're standing on either side of this piano, and there's a guy playing piano that's playing the chords and stuff as they're coming up with the song. That's Greg Fillingane's. Okay, so so there's that story. So I happened to be there in that moment when that happened. So that's a crazy thing, and I'll never forget that. Another crazy story is that Stevie Wonder actually performed in my backyard. So in addition to those two concerts he did, and a lot of people don't know this, he actually played in my backyard. So what happened is my mom decided that she wanted to invite all the guys that worked with Stevie over to our house and to have a big party. And so, and it was to basically thank them for putting up with me and letting me hang out with them and stuff. That was her thought behind all that. And so it's like, okay, cool. I think she also had another motivation, which was a lot of these guys were single, and she had some single female lady friends. And so they got invited to this party as well. So I think she was trying to make a love connection somewhere. But anyway, so we had this party, and the band was invited over, and some of the staff member and stuff. And the band was always on call. So they would, most of the time, they would just be at the hotel unless Stevie called them and said, hey, I need you to come to the studio and do whatever. And so, Mr. Davis is asking, was he known as Steve's Eyes? Are you talking about Calvin, his brother? If that's what you're talking about, yes. I don't remember if he was actually referred to as that, but usually, like if you've ever seen him like on any shows and stuff where Stevie is led on stage or off stage, usually it was Calvin. It was his brother Calvin that did that. So yeah. And Stevie also had a sister, Renee Hardaway. And she was around my age. I keep forgetting if she was a year older than me or a year younger than me, but she was right around my age. And every once in a while, she would be down here. So she would kind of come in and out. And Michael is Stevie in your backyard. Now that's boss. Yeah, it's insane. And what's even more insane, I don't think we took any pictures from that or any home video or anything like that. We didn't do any of that. we were just like in the moment, of living in it. But anyway, the way it happened was, so my mom invited the band members over. So they're over hanging out and stuff. And so my dad invited this band, of which Mr. Davis was the bass player for, and played other instruments as well. A group called Deep South, and they were, uh, local musicians and singers who would play in the area and play other places too. They tour around, but he got them to come and play as entertainment in our backyard. So I think we were barbecuing and stuff, and we had a bar set up, and whatever. So they played out in the backyard. Well, at one point they were taking a break when um, Stevie called Clarence and said, "Hey, where's the band?" And it's like, "Oh, they're you know." He goes, "Oh, they're at Bruce's house. Bruce's parents are throwing a party." He's like, "What?" And so he goes. Miss Renee says she remembers Deep South. Oh yeah, they were the they were. It was all about them. They were it. Um, and so um, anyway, um, Stevie decided to come to the party. He's like, "Well, why didn't they invite me?" And it obviously was one of those things of like, "Well, that's awkward, inviting Stevie Wonder." And who knows if he would have come, or whatever. And so he comes and he shows up and hangs out, and it was the coolest thing. Like, Stevie Wonder's in my house. This is amazing. And Stevie arrived while the band was taking a break. So then at one point the band members went back outside and were getting ready to do their next set. And so they turn on the amps and stuff. And so a distinctive sound that amps and stuff would make back then. And then whoever turned it on also played on the keyboard or whatever. And so Stevie heard it and went, wait, there's musical instruments here? And I'm like, yeah, there was a band that was playing. He goes, "Oh man." He goes, "Well, let's go play." And so Stevie goes out in the backyard, and first he plays on the drums. He gets on the drum set, lead him over to the drum set. He plays drums for a few minutes. And like, I didn't know he was that good. I was like, "Oh man, he's amazing." Then at one point he played bass, and he finally made his way to the keyboard, and he's playing on there, and he's jamming and stuff. And we're just all just like, "Oh man, he's an incredible musician." Then he calls up the band, and they do a little mini concert in our backyard, and it was just incredible, and Deep South played again, and everything, but it was just awesome. And they'll say, "Yep, he was there. He can vouch for me and tell you that that's how it all went down." So those are some of my Stevie Wonder stories. I have a bunch more, but we're running out of time, including a birthday party that I'm still bitter about to this day. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about how I kind of reunited with some of the folks from Stevie Wonder's band years later, decades later, that I finally reunited with them, because I didn't keep in touch with them after they left. First couple of years, they sent us Christmas cards and stuff, but I never really wrote back or anything. I don't know what my deal was, but yeah. So anyway, but yeah, that was my summer, or not summer, but my year of interacting and knowing Stevie Wonder and his band Wonder Love, and all these amazing people who would go on to do amazing things. And it is kind of funny, and maybe the next time I'll get a chance to tell you the story of how life and God brought it all full circle back to where I reconnected with Greg Fillinganes, and with someone else who was involved with Stevie. That was part of Stevie's entourage, and part of his band at that time. So anyway, so those are my stories. I hope I didn't bore you too much. It really is. I have a friend of mine, or actually several friends, who've told me that I need to write a book, and I actually am working on a book. I'm actually working on two simultaneously. One is a particular type of book that's just the benefit of things I've learned as I traveled around the world. And then the other, I wanted to do one that was just my life and just the anecdotes of things that have happened, like these things, and the different people I've met and how they've impacted me, and the different opportunities I've had, that any one of those things would be the highlight of anyone's full life. And to know that I've experienced all of them is an absolute blessing. And please understand, that's not me bragging at all. That's all God. Like, that's all God just putting me in these situations. And so, thank you, brother. Thank you for tuning in, man. And for those of you who are watching, make sure you tune in to Michael Galloway's First Mind podcast. Uh, I think it happens each week, right? Is it Wednesdays? I probably messed that up. I think it's either Mondays or Wednesdays. But First Mind podcast, it's really cool. I remember so well the album. He did call it The Secret Life of Plants. Yeah, Journey Through the Secret Life of Plants. Yeah. So, and my friend Karen is saying goodbye. Can't wait till next time. Big hugs to you too. Say hello. Excuse me. Say hello to your family and all my friends over in Germany. I miss you guys. So again, thank you guys for tuning in. I really, really appreciate it, and for allowing me to share my stories with you, my Stevie Wonder stories. There's one last thing I do want to share. I want to share with you is this. Hopefully, you guys can read this. Let me switch it so it can be bigger. So this is something else that, in terms of my Facebook feed blowing up, and my social media feed blowing up, this is something I posted a few months ago, and it really caught on, and people were sharing it like crazy. And I think it's worth sharing again. And this is just something that I thought and said, and just want to keep sharing. And despite all the craziness that's going on in the world, and no matter what you hear in the media that makes you lean towards hating your fellow man, or or what have you, fellow countrymen, whatever it is, step back, breathe, and forget it. Because at the end of the day, there's more love than hate in the world. The haters just happen to be louder. It seems like there's more hate just because they get more attention, right? And they're louder. The rest of us who are all about love need to turn up the volume. So I just want to remind you guys of that, and to tell you to please be safe out there. Please know that coronavirus is real, and I have friends who have suffered from it, and who, luckily, all of them have survived, but a number of them will probably be living with the after effects for a long time. So please don't believe the hype from the people who are trying to say that it's not real. It is real. So please take precautions, if not for yourself, for everyone else. Okay? Much love to all of you. Thank you guys so much for joining, and we will see you guys again next time. Peace out.